The negotiations on phase 2 are supposed to start last week. They still haven't started. So I think Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Netanyahu and his top aides who are meeting now in Jerusalem, are trying to figure out whether it's a tactical thing or something which is much more strategic.
I think that it's a big mistake to allow people, the Palestinians or the people living in Gaza, to go back yet another time. And we don't want Hamas going back.
How do those comments have an impact on the situation right now? And how could they shape the second phase of the ceasefire deal?
So they definitely have an impact.
They certainly do. As you heard from Axios reporter Barak Ravid, the ceasefire deal between Hamas and the Israeli government has now broken down as a result of Donald Trump's statements about ethnically cleansing the Gaza Strip. Now, Hamas has put out a statement. They have said basically that it would delay until further notice the release of 3 Israeli hostages set for Saturday, set to be released on Saturday. The first major setback for the ceasefire and hostage release deal. In a statement, Hamas said it had announced the delay 5 days ahead of the expected release to leave time for negotiations. Now, Hamas cited recent Israeli shelling and gunfire in Gaza, along with an insufficient flow of aid, in a statement announcing the move. But as you heard from Ravid, the statements from Donald Trump have played a role, has made an impact. And Trump doesn't like ever suffering consequences for anything he does wrong. And so he has put out another statement. Ravid writes on X that Trump says that if all hostages in Gaza are not released by 12 p.m. on Saturday, the ceasefire should be canceled and let all hell break loose.
So this is exactly what we told you. So why did I vote against Trump? A lot of folks were like, oh, well, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are terrible on Gaza. They are. They funded the genocide. They didn't move Israel 1% on anything, and they were going to do exactly what their donors ordered them to. But I said Trump would be worse. Why? Because he got a record-breaking $337 million from just one family, the Adelsons, and they made him give them promises. And some of the promises were, let Israel slaughter the Palestinians any way they like, never interfere, never object. And of course, you have to pay for it. You have to make America pay for it. So we're not giving you all these bribes. I mean, campaign contributions for our health. We're doing it to buy American foreign policy, and they have. So that's why now he says absurd things like, okay, they don't give the hostages back by 12. What we're gonna do is more war. Wait, I thought you ran on anti-war. No, he's saying, no, we're gonna murder more Palestinians, create a bigger conflict, see if we can make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and start another giant war in the Middle East. Because why? Because you're a neocon. So the reality is, of course, Trump doesn't care about neocon ideology or anti-war ideology. He has no ideology at all. So this is a battle between his donors and potentially his base. So one of our members, Trisha Briggs, wrote in on Super Chat, Cenk, who cares what they think, referring to MAGA. I'm begging you, as a longtime member and fan, there's no brakes in this car. But Trisha, that's why we're asking to see if there's any way to put a brake in there. Because here's who Trump's not going to listen to, the left. Here's another thing that Trump's not going to listen to, mainstream media. So we can go in the streets and mainstream media can say how terrible he is, and we can say how terrible he is. And it's not gonna affect him 1%. If we do that strategy, those Palestinians will definitely get slaughtered. And then we will be paying 20, 40, 80, unlimited billions of dollars to Israel to murder those poor people and literally now steal their land, just as we told you they were going to. What is the only potential break in the car? Whether we like it or not, it's MAGA. Because MAGA also is anti-war. I know no one believes me, and we're gonna all find out together. So if I'm wrong, MAGA is gonna say, a new war, we love it. Giving Israel more money, we love it. They're our special ally. And if they do, guys, come back and say, Cenk, I can't believe it. There was no pushback at all. You were totally wrong. MAGA loves funding Israel. They love slaughtering, etc. Okay, maybe, but that's our only hope. I'm being honest.
Yeah.
You could pretend there's another hope, but there isn't. What is Trump going to do? Listen to the world community over his donors?
Yeah.
The only thing he will ever listen to, potentially maybe over his donors, is his base.
Right.
Period.
That's literally the only, and by the way, I don't even have it at 50-50 at this point. I mean, he has very clearly opted to side with the pro-corporate tech side of things as opposed to the populist side of things. So Steve Bannon, he represents the more populist wing of MAGA. He's out. Elon Musk won. Elon Musk is the antithesis of populism. And so I don't have a lot of hope, to be honest with you. I'm just keeping it real. But let me give you some more details about what's happening in regard to the breakdown of this ceasefire deal. So let's hear more from Barak Ravid. He was on CNN explaining, what he has learned from his sources. Take a look.
There are some Israeli officials who are involved in the negotiations that think that this is also a signal by Hamas that it's their way to push back on Trump's recent comments about moving Palestinians out of Gaza, and also a signal by Hamas that if Netanyahu is not going to seriously negotiate on the second phase of the deal, then maybe maybe phase one will not be implemented in its entirety, and not all the hostages in phase one will be released.
So there's certainly indication that it's not just Hamas that has essentially backed out of this ceasefire deal. There was already indication that Benjamin Netanyahu had no intention with following through on the second phase of the deal, or even the rest of the first phase. And if you don't believe me, you should know what the hostages' family members have been protesting about and what they've been saying. Take a look at that.
We see the pictures coming from Tel Aviv. You have families, you have supporters of the families taking to the streets. Barak, what is the domestic pressure on Netanyahu in this, and how is that being perceived by Netanyahu and those close to him?
I think the pressure has been increasing quite dramatically since the hostages started coming out, and especially after last Saturday when the last 3 hostages who were released came out in a very, very bad physical condition. It created a wave of pressure on the government, both in demonstrations on the streets and both by statements by families of hostages who were released and families of hostages who are still in Hamas captivity. And I think the number one issue you hear from hostage families is deep concern that both Netanyahu, or a deep concern that Netanyahu managed to convince President Trump that phase 2 of the deal is not that important, and that the resumption of the war is more crucial at the moment.
I think that those fears are entirely legitimate. When the ceasefire deal was decided upon, I didn't believe for a second that Netanyahu specifically was going to follow through on it because he wants that land. I think that's been pretty clear. And they've already, even before Trump got elected, they were already making plans to build illegal settlements in Gaza. Okay, those facts don't just magically disappear and go away.
Yeah.
But look, it's so obvious to me that Netanyahu persuaded Donald Trump to sour on the ceasefire deal, because over the weekend, Trump put out some statements about how emaciated the Israeli hostages looked when they were being returned by Hamas. Yeah, they did look emaciated. Turns out that when you refuse to allow humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip as this war is ongoing, and as you continue bombarding it with 2,000-pound bombs, it's not just slaughtering Palestinians, it's not just starving Palestinians to death. The hostages are also in the Gaza Strip. Obviously, they're going to be impacted by that blockade of humanitarian aid.
I mean, look at the absurdity of the Israeli reaction, which is, can you believe that as we were starving the Palestinians, some of our hostages were also starving? Well, they're Israelis. Did they not know that their lives are worth 10,000 Palestinian lives? They should have been super well fed while the Palestinian babies are starving to death. What kind of lunatic thinks that was a realistic possibility?
Yeah.
So I feel terrible for those hostages. We got to get those hostages home. The way to get them home is a peace deal, not a fake ceasefire like this one. So he says, if Netanyahu might value, Ravid, the reporter there, resumption of the war more than he values those hostages.
100%.
But wait, I want to be clear. There is no war here. All of Hamas's leaders are dead. And Hamas is doing almost nothing at this point. So it would be a resumption of the genocide and the wholesale slaughter of Palestinians. There are almost no legitimate military targets left in Gaza. It's almost utterly destroyed. Trump says, hey, you can't live there because the whole thing is destroyed. By the way, he says, side note, we will live there. You can't live there because we destroyed your homes, but we'll be building homes for Israelis now, and they can live there. But meanwhile, even though the whole place is destroyed, we have to resume the war. There's no war. All there is the most gross ethnic cleansing, genocide, starvation, disgusting slaughter that I have ever seen. So we're all seeing it with our own eyes. Finally, they asked, did the administration have a plan when Trump, out of the blue, seemingly out of the blue, announced that we were going to own Gaza? And of course, when asked that, the people inside the administration say, no, of course there was no plan, because Trump made it up after Netanyahu talked to him, and Netanyahu reminded him who the goddamn boss is and how he'd like to be. If he allows him, he'll let America be second. And then he walked him around the Oval Office probably on a leash. And then Trump sat him down like a freaking waiter.
Literally pulled the chair for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and of course the Netanyahu reaction, as Anna read earlier in the show, was he was elated. He's like, this is even better than we imagined. We're gonna get these sucker Americans to finance the entire slaughter, green light it, pay for it. We might even get them to do it instead of risking any precious Israeli lives, which are, by the way, also worth 10,000 American lives. No life is as precious on this planet as an Israeli life. And so we all have to pay for everything, for everyone around them to be killed, to protect them. No, to steal land. By the way, every Israeli defender who said they wouldn't go to Gaza to steal the land, okay. I want confessions, I want apologies, how wrong you were. Of course they were going to steal the land. Of course that was the whole point. And by the way, let's remember, on October 7th, they knew that Hamas was planning to do it. We'd have that from Israeli sources, indisputable, and chose to do nothing about it because they thought, oh, it's probably not real. Really? Or maybe they use it as an excuse to slaughter the Palestinians and steal their land, exactly as we said at the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, look, the people that were making those arguments, oh no, that's not gonna happen. They knew. I'm not gonna believe for a second they didn't know it was the plan all along. It was the most obvious thing in the world.
No, Anna, the only thing I'll disagree with is the people in government certainly knew, the Israeli right wing knew, but a lot of folks who support Israel are so blinded by their bias, they genuinely believe that, and well, Israel by definition is an angel, the most moral thing on the planet.
Right.
So they really deluded themselves into thinking, we're not gonna steal their land.
Right, I don't know.
No, this is about defense. We're tiny little David. We're such a tiny minuscule thing. I mean, we crushed the living hell out of everyone in Gaza. We destroyed almost all their buildings and slaughtered them endlessly, but we're so the victims. But they do believe that. They definitely believe that, it's genuine. And right now, anybody watching this that's of that point of view is livid with me, thinking, don't you know October 7th was so much more important? Why? Because they're Israeli lives. You killed 60 times the number of Palestinians, but those lives are irrelevant. There's a terrorist. Everyone who says that is a full-blown, like way worse than any right-winger you've ever accused of this, racist, who says, who cares if we kill 60 of their children for one of ours? Because our lives are more important and more valuable. That is by definition disgusting racism.